Most of you know him. I probably don't need to tell you too much other than the fact that it seems like you've just done everything in this life to be a great teacher. And so many of us have benefited from that. So I really look forward to your word today, to what you can tell us about the mystical tradition, one of many topics that Tom could have chosen for this day. Hopefully, this won't be the first time that we have you. I hope you'll want to come back. So let me turn it right over to Tom. We're going to record.
Thank you to Rosalind for being such a professional. I'm not used to this. She lined everything up so well, and it is not gone overlooked, believe me. So it's good to be back with all of you folks. We are united by some common experiences, one of which is the fact that Pebble Hill has called us together, either today as our first time or sometime in the past. And if we believe that there are no coincidences, then we're grateful for that. We're united also biologically with everybody here, with all human beings and all the animals and all living things on the planet. We are united, ourselves and the planet, chemically, with all of our magnesium and phosphorus and cobalt and chloride and iron and all those things that we share with the great Mother Earth. We are united atomically with all of our galaxies and our whole universe. And we are united also by that substrate of all that exists, what Paul Tillich calls the very ground of our being, that we can call God or not. But whatever it is that generates life and embodies life and makes life go forward, that is moving all the time inside you and I. We are all part of this cosmic dance. And here we are again talking about the only thing really worth talking about, our relationship with life, including God, as we see it. Reminds me of a story of the two fish who were swimming in the ocean. And the one fish was kind of confused, looked like it was lost. And it swam up to another fish, and the fish said, "Well, can I help you? What are you looking for?" And he said, "I'm looking for the ocean." And the fish said, "My friend, you're swimming in it. And we are swimming in God." That is the great mystical insight that all of the great seers have always known, that there is no place that God is not. Nothing is profane. Everything is sacred. And everywhere we look, there is another masterstroke by that great artist, whatever that power is that moves our universe. We're here also because we're looking for answers. And that's such a great thing, because there are many, many people in the world who think they've got it all figured out. Nothing to learn. Got all the answers. But the people who are drawn to a community like Pebble have never been so disillusioned. Always been open to something new, a different insight into what life is all about. And that's really the actual practical starting point of the spiritual journey. The fact that you're looking for something. The great poet Dante, in his book, The Divine Comedy, starts it off. It's written in Italian, but I'll translate it. He said, I was in the middle of my life when I found myself lost in the middle of the woods. Then God can do something with us. If we say, I'm lost. The Chinese have the same kind of an insight, where they have the stepping stones of spiritual growth in Taoism. And the very first stepping stone is being lost. So may we never lose that sense that we're all students. And I'm up here pretending that I'm a teacher, and you're pretending that I'm telling you something you don't already know, because we all want to keep that humility that keeps us growing and growing and growing. And as you know, that has been my life. I'm now pushing 79, and I have been on this journey for most of my life, really. And I keep growing, and I keep learning. But the good news is right now, I feel like I'm finally ready to say something meaningful. So let's scratch the previous 79 years, because I didn't know what I was talking about. But here we are talking about a beautiful topic, and that is the mystical tradition. Let's start with the word tradition. It comes from the Latin word tradere, which means to hand over. But one of the fuller definitions of it, according to Webster's dictionary, is to hand over for safekeeping. I like that. So that's kind of what we're doing right now. We're talking about that tradition so that we can find a way to pass it on. And this tradition, in one form or the other, has been around a long, long time. The kind of tradition that we're talking about, that mystical tradition. What does that mean? The word mystical comes from the Latin mysticus, which means an initiate. I-N-I-A-T-E, initiate. Someone who has been introduced into something. Those kind of folks, to one degree or the other, have always been with us. Those who have stepped into the great mysteries that the religions of the world can only point to. If all you have is a religious path, that's a good thing, nothing wrong with that. But all that does is it makes you religious, unless you go the extra step and let go and surrender. People have often been afraid to do so, and why not? Because the stakes are high. To be a mystic doesn't mean you just go to a bunch of workshops, you read a bunch of books, you get a lot of insights. Nothing wrong with any of that. I've been there and done that. But the real initiation comes when we let go and surrender to God. Not halfway, but all the way. Ooh, that's scary. There was mention of a couple of movies earlier today. Well, one of my favorite guys is coming back again. That's Indiana Jones. And one scene from his final movie before this was he's in search of the Holy Grail. Okay. The Holy Grail is a symbol. Literally, it means the cup that Jesus drank from. But in reality, it's a symbol of the true self. And he's running and following his book that tells him, go here, go there. And that's like reading all the books of religion that are telling you, take this step, take that step. But then he gets to the edge of a chasm. And he looks down, and it's about 1,000-foot drop. And he's run out of room because his enemies are chasing him from behind. And he thinks to himself, okay, now what do I do? And he looks in the book, and the book says, take a step. I get the chills when I say that. And when he does, he's supported by an unforeseen force, and he's able to traverse over this canyon. That's what the mystic has done. The mystic has dared to take a step, even though it can be scary, even though there's a lot to lose. But if the person has done that and lived to tell about it, they look back and they say, that was the best thing I ever did. And I still can't believe I did it. What was I thinking? But it can change a person's life. I hope this doesn't sound too obscure. And by the way, it should be mentioned as we talk about these eternal verities, the eternal truths, that everything that I've said so far this morning and everything that I will say, I never learned in the seminary. Not a word of it. 9 years. 4 studying at the Vatican. Best teachers in the world. But they're on a whole different level. That's about teaching religion. But religion is supposed to be the handmaid of spirituality. It's supposed to lead people to a mystical experience. But does it? Not really. I was preparing a talk recently on Carl Jung, the great psychiatrist who's meant a lot to me personally in my spiritual journey. And he tells a story about himself as a young boy. He's about 9 years old. He goes to ask his father a question. His father is a minister in the Swiss Reformed Church. His grandfather was also a minister in the Swiss Reformed Church. So he asks his father, "Dad, I'm so interested in the Trinity. Tell me about that." And he says in so many ways his father had all the blood drained from his face. The deer in the headlights look. And Jung says, as a young boy, 8 or 9 years old, he said, "I realize my father doesn't know anything except some words and some formulas. He doesn't have a feel for the Trinity that he already did at 8 or 9 years of age." So this is something that the churches have never quite been sure what to do with. On the one hand, every religious tradition has had its share of mystics, those who have done like Indiana Jones and taken the step. But you'll never hear it recommended from the podium in church. What you get instead is what I call secondhand religion. You're having an experience of somebody else's experience. But if you want to really grow, people are afraid of that, even the basics. Something as simple as if you go to your typical priest or minister or rabbi and just say, "Please teach me how to pray." Again, the blood drains out of the face. And it's not a case of, well, these folks, they know, but they're not telling us. They don't know either. So it's a paradox today that on the one hand, we have religions, especially the so-called mainline religions, that are falling apart. The Catholics, all the Protestant churches, some of the traditional Jewish synagogues, people are scrambling to kind of rearrange deck chairs on the Titanic because people want something more. And this is an indication of that. This is a little seed that's planted here with Pebble Hill. I want to mention before I say anything else here that I really do hope we're going to have a nice little dialogue today. So I'm going to try to leave like 25 minutes to hear from you folks. And this will be your chance to ask any kind of question, no matter how outrageous it is. about God and the meaning of life. Okay, so, if not now, when? Bobby Kennedy had said that. And if not here, then where? So allow yourselves to think. I'd like to get a dialogue going here. One of the things that we know about this mystical tradition then is it's something that transcends religions. It's found in some way in every religion, small little tiny pockets. But it's bigger than that. So the purpose of religion basically is to give you a mystical experience, but that's not what it does so often. It just gives you a religious experience. Nothing wrong with that, but that doesn't quench the thirst of the human heart for the truth. And there have been these small numbers of people over the centuries who have always sensed this. Now, Homo sapiens, we've been around maybe 30 million years. We have pre-recorded history, but pretty much from the time of the Egyptians on, there have been systems that have been devised to prepare people for this initiation. But being prepared for it doesn't make the initiation happen. So you can go through all the courses and be wearing a white robe and do whatever is expected. And if you're just standing there and your heart has not really surrendered, then nothing happens. It's an inner experience of saying one to God, oneness. One of the first times, I heard this was I was in my 30s at this point, studying for a master's degree up in Fordham University in spirituality. And give you an idea, in the Diocese of Camden, which is where I come from, it's been around about 100 years, there's never been a priest before or since who's even studied spirituality. It's like, what for? That kind of answers a lot, doesn't it? And I spoke to the bishop and told him that's what I wanted to study. And again, he said, well, why would you want to do that? I'm thinking, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? Isn't this something that we're all supposed to be aiming for? But most people they're not there yet. And this is going to sound like a harsh saying, but I always quote the master because he's always got the answers. And he says, it's like throwing your pearls before swine. You try to bring up any of this stuff at Thanksgiving dinner, it'd be worse than having a political argument. But, those who have had this experience can look in the eyes of somebody who's had that experience and both know without saying a word. There's an expression that all mystics speak the same language and come from the same country. So whether you are Jewish, Protestant, Catholic, a Muslim, a Taoist, that person, because there is only one quote unquote God, it could be an acronym for good, orderly direction of the universe. There's only one substrate. They had to have had a similar experience. There's only one substrate that holds us all together. So how could we think there's only one religion that has the answer? It's the height of arrogance. Now, one person that helped me understand that was a famous saint by the name of Augustine. He's as orthodox as they can get. The Augustinians over at Villanova are named after him and his thinking. He was a really, really smart guy. But he also realized that brains alone do not do it. He had to have what you might call a nervous breakdown that led to a breakthrough. But once he got his head together on this, here's what he said about Christianity. Now, this quote, if anybody's interested, I'll tell you where it comes from. The church fathers and mothers have done a good job hiding this quote because they're just not quite sure what to make out of it. Here's what he says in his book, The Retractions. And he's commenting here on a previous book that he wrote entitled On the True Religion. He says, "For what is now called the Christian religion existed even among the ancients and was not lacking from the beginning of the human race until Christ came in the flesh. From that time, true religion, which already existed, began to be called Christian. For this reason, I said, in our times, this is the Christian religion, not because it did not exist in former times, but because it had received this name in later times." And when I read that the first time, my reaction was, huh? What's he saying? That like Jesus did not invent Christianity. So Christianity must be something that is linked to universal truth. And when you go deep enough in all these traditions, you find they are all linked together in what has also been called the perennial philosophy. So it's always been known. It's always been understood by those who have taken the plunge. Now, what the religions have almost always done, though, to the mystics is to marginalize them as much as possible, and then maybe later, after they're dead, name them as saints. But we're talking about everything from being thrown in prison to the Roman Inquisition. And every religion has had that experience of taking these people who are so arrogant that they think they know more than the priests and the rabbis do. But they don't know any more in terms of books. That's not it. It's a different kind of knowing. It's a knowing of the heart. And what is it in a nutshell? There is a sense that the ultimate truth is found in a threefold manner. Number one, life comes from something. There is the substrate that has given birth to it all. But, and then this is the huge, huge thing here, every part of creation participates in that force. So, are you and I part of God? Of course. We're not the creator. Look at it this way. We are like the handiwork of God, whatever this intelligent force is. Okay? And we're not just a painting, that would be beautiful enough, but we're a painting that is in the process of continually evolving. So God is found in the whole and in all the parts, and God is found in the evolution of our understanding of this. So let's get clear about a couple things then. There is no God that looks like you and I. That is an anthropomorphizing, trying to create God in our image and likeness. But so many people still think that. I listened to the news the other day, and somebody's talking about the man upstairs. And, we understand it. A batter hits a home run, it crosses home plate. It's okay, but that is not the answer. And especially young people today know that kind of thing doesn't make any sense. We're not trying to reduce spirituality to science, but we're trying to say that spirituality is built upon science. Science is the jumping off point. But if you're trying to say, do you believe in God? The question has to be, well, what do you mean by that? And some people who call themselves atheists, we might have more in common with them than many believers. I got one of my nephews who calls himself an atheist. And my two brothers and I, we hear this and we kind of laugh and we say, he's not smart enough to be an atheist. If he's saying he, doesn't believe in an old man with a beard, okay, we get that. We don't either, I don't think. But humanity has evolved and continues to evolve in its understanding of life. Got about 5 minutes or so before we start opening things up. So let me point to a great philosopher from the Renaissance. I won't even mention his name because nobody's heard of it. But he said that the evolution of humankind, the way he sees it, now he's a Christian himself. He said it's evolved in 3 epochs. The first is around 2000 BC up to the time of Jesus. And he calls that the age of the Father, where people, evolutionarily speaking, were trying to appease God, make offerings to God, altars to God, churches to God, promises to God as a being. But remember, what we're saying here is that God is not a being. What an insult that would be to shrink God down to that. God is being with a capital B. All that is seen and all that is unseen. So to say, well, it's only everything you see, that's pantheism. But there's a way to tweak that makes a lot more sense, and that's called panentheism. So it's not that just God is everything, but God is in everything and not confined to what we see here. So he says then, those 2,000 years were the age of the Father. So you're worshiping God, okay? Because God is utterly transcendent. He says from the time of Jesus, now he's saying this in the 1500s, remember. From the time of Jesus until around the year 2000, he said, we'll call that the age of the Son, where people will say, oh my Lord, look at Jesus, here is somebody who's God among us. And that's an incredible thing. And we look at other saints that have arisen in every religion, holy men and women. And, we begin to get a sense that, God is present in certain individuals like this. Okay? But then he said, and again, remember, this is 500 years before he's alive. He said, from around the year 2000, for the next 2,000 years, he said, that will be the age of the Spirit. And people will awaken to the fact that God is within them. God is within everybody. That's the great awakening. God is in every tree, every animal, every human being. People don't have to become spiritual. They already are. They just have to wake up to it. So in a sense, you gain by losing. You let go of the things in yourself that are self-centered, petty, not worthy of that divine spark that is within us. So again, you don't go out and decide, okay, I'm going to become spiritual. What do I have to do? Sign me up. It will be a case, most typically, that God will break us down. And then, after so much of the false self has been broken down, we will discover what Jesus calls the pearl of great price. He calls it the kingdom within. So in other words, as we are dispelled of the notions that, oh, I'm my body, or my education, or my bank account, or even my relationships, we realize that you and I are really nothing. We are no thing. Final point, and we'll open it up. One of the things that is really hopeful is that the latest thinking in quantum physics, now I'm not going to get complicated here on this one, is basically arriving at a similar conclusion that all of the mystics have always arrived at, and that is there is nothing solid about us. Okay? We have these bodies that come and go, and inside the body, there's tissues and bones and organs. Inside those things, we find cells. Inside the cells, there are atoms. Inside the atoms, neutrons, protons, electrons. Inside that, quarks, which are random patterns of energy. So we are led into, let's call it the palace of nowhere, that frees us up so that we have nothing to lose by being the truth, by being the light. Because we can't be killed even. We've already let go of that part of us. And it's been said that he who dies before they die does not die when they die. So that's what the mystics have known, that it's freedom, folks, it's love. And as the scientists will tell us, matter is neither created nor destroyed. We're made out of star stuff. We're not going anywhere. Even a couple of the recent popes have pointed out that heaven is not a place. It's a state of consciousness. You don't go anywhere because there's no place to go. We are part of it. God is within us. And that's what the mystics have discovered.